Hello and welcome. I am Aziel. And so today, I've been playing a lot of Borderlands. I do like the Borderlands series. I haven't, just for clarity's sake, I haven't touched the Tales of the Borderlands series. They are not the sort of game I enjoy playing. I do prefer the Borderlands main series, such as pre-sequel, 1, 2, and 3. Those are the sort of games I really enjoy playing, and I have put many, many, many hours in the series. Borderlands 3, I have just maxed out Zane, for example. And Borderlands 2, I've gone through so many times, I can pretty much play it blindfolded. I am not doing a blindfolded challenge. And so it did get me thinking, with the recent success of Halo Flashpoint from Mantic, and you have the Judge Dredd game, which is a fantastic game by Warlord Games, and the latest edition of Lord of the Rings, the Middle-earth, Battles of Middle-earth, I should say. This external IP has been quite successful, yet is a kind of an untapped market. Of course, we do have Skyrim, and we have Fallout 3, and we have Star Wars Legions, but there's so many other IPs out there which would make a great tabletop game. But I do find a lot of the problems when you especially with video games, when you transfer them over to a tabletop game, they're usually stymied in faction choice. And I think when Halo came out for Spartan Games, I think that was one of its biggest issues. You either had the Covenant or the UNSC. When Mantic took over, I was kind of concerned. I was excited because the models looked good, but I was concerned about, again, faction choices. You had the Covenant and you had the UNSC. So when Mantic went down the route of having a skirmish game based on Drop Zone, it was a very good choice because they were basing it off the multiplayer side of Halo rather than the story side. And it has been hugely successful and good for Mantic as well on that point. So when it comes to Borderlands, I think Mantic might be the best choice for it. Now, really because of many reasons. There's so many reasons. First is the vehicles. Vehicles in Borderlands, everyone tends to use the same vehicles. You've got the Outrunners, the Technicals, the Cyclones, the Dropships. They tend to be used by everyone. Malawan, the COV, these are all very familiar vehicles which everyone uses. And way Firefight is done, you'll see many of the vehicles are used between different factions, such as the Mule. So balancing the vehicles would be pretty simple and something that Mantic already does with Firefight. The storyline within Borderlands, of course, outside of the hunting the vault, is the mega corporation war. And given that Firefight is the human side of Firefight is basically massive corporations having control over people, this really again fits into Mantic's wheelhouse of storytelling of the future. So it's those two things make me think that Mantic would be the best for Borderlands. And also, so when it comes to models, the actual models themselves, Borderlands would make, as a big tabletop game, I should say, a very interesting one and quite exciting. Because while you could obviously say, what about the Vault Hunters? That's what the main story of Borderlands is, of course, hunting the vaults, etc. There is a secondary story which comes up in all the games outside of it. I don't know about the Tales of Borderlands. I haven't played them. They're not my style of game. So I will probably never play them. You do have this background story of a corporation war. Again, something that Mantic could easily do and has done before with Firefight. And this would give you a wild selection of factions. You could have robots for Hyperion. You would have heavily armored soldiers for Atlas. You'd have the Crimson Raiders for the Vault Hunters, should you wish to go down that way, and of course Bandits, etc. for the EOV. And even then, you got Jacobs, which could be more cowboy and Western orientated, and you have Dole, and every single faction has their own way of fighting, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And with this, we could have more lore outside of the Vault themselves and how this big corporation war is actually affecting people and how they dominate planets, how they can take over other corporations, like we saw in Borderlands 3, with the Malawan trying to take over Atlas by force and destroying their planet. And this would again, this would really expand upon the lore of Borderlands via the tabletop. And so when it actually comes to the rules themselves, you could have a very balanced game based on the weapons within Borderlands. See, Jacob's army would be low armor, high powered, but low shot. So while they could take things out quite quickly and hardly, they would be much aligned to a glass cannon. Something like Hyperion would be, lots of shots, but again, you'd have weaker weapons than Jacob's, and you'd have robots as well. And they would be like the undead, because they could be brought back to life with surveyors, etc., and anything else. COV would just be numbers and everything else. So you'd get a wide range, I should say, of different models and different ways of it can be played. Something like Malawan would be more oriental but have high, elements. They would have a more elemental weaponry compared to everyone else. But again, it'd be a lower actual impact, but a higher chance of such as freezing, which you could say is pinning. And this is why I think Mantic would be good at this, because they're very good at these old style of rules as well, such as fear, panic, etc. And now I think they could very much assimilate these corrosive, frozen, cryo, I should say, fire, all these elements quite well into the game as well, using the same sort of mechanics as we see in Firefight and Kings of War. So, in my opinion, I think if Borderlands became a big tabletop game, it would be based around the mega corporation war, and Mantic would be the best way to do it, because they would be able to add the odd special named characters such as Lilith, Roland Zero, and other Vault Hunters, or main bad guys, Handsome Jack, Tyrone and Tyrese, etc., into different armies. Like Tyrone and Tyrese, obviously COV, where someone like Zero could be with the Crimson Raiders, or he could be with Atlas, and it would work really well. So that would be the main game. So that would be the big game. If there was to be a skirmish game, something more aligned to Judge Dredd, because in this way I think Warlord Games would be in their wheelhouse if they used a similar rule structure and game structure to Judge Dredd. You'd have very few overpowered people, such as Judge Dredd. These could be the Vault Hunters, and you'd have a variety of different armies and factions they could fight against, such as the Crimson Raiders, and you'd have the high numbers versus the low numbers of enemies versus the low number of Vault Hunters. And of course, you'd have the name Vault Hunters as always, against like the COV, etc. But it would be more of a smaller game, and again, much aligned with Judge Dredd. So, if Borderlands became a game, I would like to say it would be better as a big tabletop game, focusing on the mega corporation war, and Mantic would be very much in their wheelhouse to make that game. Whereas if it was a small skirmish game, as much as I do love War Cradle, but because they do like very similar sized posses, I don't think it would be quite in their wheelhouse to do that, because World of Exodus is very balanced, because of you get very similar sized posses, but with Judge Dredd, where you'd have like Judge Dredd and Judge Anderson just owning a tabletop compared to like 16 gangers, it would be better for them to take it, because they could take the Vault Hunters and replace them with the judges, and then you could also have like Judge Dredd, you could have like the Clay Car and the gangs. You could just have like Hyperion fighting bandits. So that would be my way I would want these games to be seen. So what are your thoughts on a Borderlands tabletop game? How would you like to see it done? How would you think it would be interesting for everyone to play and see and do, etc. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're all having a lovely day, and I'll see you all again in the next one. There is a link to Wayland Games down below if you wish to save up to 20% on your wargaming and free delivery up to £20. And don't forget, they do have this really cool point system where it ends up being an extra 1% off. Every little counts, as Tesco's would to say. There's Forbidden Planet, My Comics, and Skyforge. And let's not forget Skyforge, and finally Patreon, because business. Bye bye.